welcome to Unsourced Wall. My name is Elvis Dutan, and as always, I am your host. As you probably all know, Avengers Endgame came out this weekend. I did see it. I am going to put a review later on. I'll also do a spoiler-free review. No harm, no foul, no worries, but we'll get to that later. First things first, let's start off with some movie news. And the first thing we have is actually something Dark Phoenix related. Apparently, the third act finale has been reshot to, instead of being an outer space-based final battle, it'll be set on the train tracks heavily used in recent trailers. I mean, that final set piece does look really cool, but it seems to me like a lot of people are taking this movie to task and mocking this change, which is strange to me because the X-Men films haven't really been known for their outrageous spectacle. I mean, sure, you get your fight at the White House full of Sentinels here and there, but you also get the very minimal brawl at the base of the Statue of Liberty. It's not a franchise that's really founded on oppressive set pieces. It's odd to really call it out for that. And the bits we do see of this sequence do look really awesome. I don't really get the problem here. I just hope that isn't jarring as hell because it's been reshot. But we'll see. And fingers crossed. We also have a new trailer for Men in Black International, and it's way better than the first. It looks like it's keeping the same charming nature of the series, while not seeming as tired and exhausted as the original sequels did. Looks like it actually wants to be a Men in Black movie, which is good. The jokes are funny, the chemistry is great, and the storyline could be really fun if they go all out with it. One joke didn't really land at all, and it was kind of a groaner, but in an alternate trailer, that joke gets decent payoff. So I can't complain. It looks like they really have thought things through. And I hope that it keeps up the good work, because if it does, I might actually start getting excited for it. It looks like it could be a nice, decent time. So fingers crossed too. And lastly, in movie news, I guess some guy got beaten up for giving out Endgame spoilers to a crowd waiting in front of a theater, and people then took this and started cheering on and on. It's not a good look on either end, really, but let's move on because that is still way too much to unpack there. Heading on into TV news, we have our first full trailer to Swamp Thing, and well, it actually kind of looks pretty bad. Like, I don't know if it's just the trailer and how it was cut and put together, but my expectations for the show kind of plummeted hard with it. It just looks so cliche and uninspired. The effects, the visuals, the general tone, it's just the most blandest thing. The only really exciting aspect of the trailer are the looks we get of the rot. I mean, the rot looks pretty awesome. They're perfectly creepy and disgusting, but it also makes me seriously disappointed that they're going straight for it, because the rot hampers Anton Arcane a lot in what you can do with him. It's a straight bypass of everything cool about him in favor of the newest things, like his gothic nature or the Dr. Frankenstein stuff, or like the body horror things that he creates himself that aren't just an evil decay force. I mean, I do want to see some Unmen, honestly, which seems too much to ask for now. Even the Jim Wynorski sequel to Craven's original movie had Unmen. But yeah, it just looks really low quality and low effort everywhere else in that trailer. And that's a shame. Hope I'm wrong, or that's just bad marketing, because there's really nothing to get excited about in that trailer. That just seems like every other trailer for low budget direct-to-video horror. So yeah, fingers crossed. I hope that turns out good. And lastly, we have comic news. And Eisner nominees got announced this week. There's a lot of good, a lot of shocking, and still no one has told Tom King to get lost. Good luck to everyone though, and we'll see who wins when that happens. There's just so much to get through. It seems like a lot of really great stuff has gotten nominated, 2 thumbs up, and I hope people make it. Finally, we reached some reviews with what I read this week. First up is Dial H for Hero number 2, and it's another incredible issue. I'm gonna skip over a few beats here, because I just can't contain myself. I kinda love this book. It's just boundlessly entertaining, and it knows it. It's fresh, it's peppy, and it has an incredibly fun assertiveness to it. It knows exactly what kind of book it wants to be, and it isn't afraid of being outright with it. The characters retain this captivating boldness and charm, and it just makes them infinitely readable and likable to tag along with. The heroes that get dialed up are portrayed and depicted in this hilariously loving way. The issue takes the tack to manga heroes, and there are all these really accurate and carefully done homages and art style nods. It goes way past the big eyes cliche, and does stuff like actual proportions, coloring techniques, design, and even the way the translated dialogue tracks and reads here and there. It's such a perfect hit. Reminds me so much of Ambush Bugs homages and parodies in the best of ways. Some reverence, sure, but also really knowing when to let the punchlines land. It's such a fantastic book. It's quick, it's witty, it's got charisma flooding out the pages. I love the 2 main characters. I love this little slight adventure, and it kind of makes me sad that it's only a mini. I know that the creators have planned for other seasons, but as a mini, I'm kind of disappointed because it's just bounding with life here. I'm all in, and I can't wait for the next issue. 2 thumbs up. Next up, we have The Wildstorm number 22. And this issue, well, with 2 issues to go, this issue is a bit of a waste. It just feels so middling and unsubstantial. There's some cute interplay, but it's got no real meat to all of it. Not even anything like a great sequence of action scenes like the previous issues. It just feels empty. This entire final arc has been so lackadaisical compared to every other arc that came before it. It's kind of insane. And there's nothing really even bad about it, but it's just so boring and inconsequential. It's fluff. I really do hope the next 2 issues amp things up a lot, and I know I'm not expecting an ending. They never promised an ending, so that's off the table. But this shouldn't go out on an apathetic whimper. It really shouldn't. And it feels like it just might. So yeah, that's kind of a waste potential. You should be able to feel like there is rolling motion so quick to the end, but now it doesn't. And I feel like it's going to be rushed. And that's a shame because this series has been doing such a great job keeping up that momentum throughout these arcs, up until this last arc, which feels like they've hit a glacier. So yeah, 2 thumbs down. And lastly, we have Heroes in Crisis number 8. This was just terrible. I mean, I guess everyone already knew that, just as everyone else already guessed the answer to the mystery from day 1. So that's no shock here. What is the shock is just how stupidly inept everything about it actually was in the details. I laughed. I honestly laughed. Just at the sheer surprise that someone could write a character to be that stupid, do something that stupid, and then to make it even worse. It's like a slapstick comedy in effect. It's incredible. I'm in shock. And the best/worst part of this has been the outcry. Just seeing all these takes about this issue, like how it shows a skewed perception of mental health, or that it's grimdark for grimdark's sake, or that it's just depression wank. And thinking about how all of that also applies to Mr. Miracle, which is out here winning and being nominated for awards and Eisners. I mean, that's pretty hilarious. But this issue, this final culmination of the mystery, it's ridiculous. It's incompetent. And worst of all, it's boring. The fact that Wally would do something like this and then have the means to do something about it and then decide not to, but also the fact that he was so narrow-minded that he didn't understand that other people have emotions and inner workings and had feelings too, is just boggling my mind. Awful ideas of like what these characters actually have as their inner lives. 2 thumbs down. I'm having the time of my life here. I can't wait to see what the final issue has to offer because this is just the worst. Anyway, we have reached what I watched this week. First up is Gotham Season 5, Episode 12, the grand finale called The Beginning. We finally reached the last ever episode of Gotham, and let's just get it right out of the way. It sticks the landing. In almost every way possible, it hits the right beats, and it hits them well. With the characters, with the atmosphere, with the tone and the function of the story. It's a send-off and a beginning, for sure. And for a rocky show as this could be, it had as many highs as it did lows. And this was a high. Sure, there are still some remaining issues that have plagued the entire season. Like the last prequel episode left a fair amount of things hanging, like Bane being in Gotham jail and Gordon hallucinating him, and also Nissa Al Ghul running off, cackling with the sub and the treasure trove of gold. None of that ever gets mentioned. I mean, it's been 10 years in the time skip, so I guess it works. But where it excels is what this season has excelled at overall, capturing the crazy, campy, character-driven, and poppy nature of the show all in 48 minutes. It tries so hard to pack in as much as it can. A Penguin scheme, a Riddler scheme, Catwoman, Batman, Joker, Batgirl. It's insanity. It's also, by virtue of that, incredibly kinetic and energetic about presenting that as good as it can. And that makes it a powerfully fun and delightfully manic episode. The cast and crew pull out all the stops to make this the best they can be. Each of these little aspects of the plot are perfect pinpoints of what they brought to this series. Bullock's steadfast, adamant, and loyal nature. Penguin's weaselly smarm. Riddler's bluster and narcissism. And Joker. Good God. Cameron Monaghan gives it everything he's got. He's magnificent. He's a delight. It's taken him 5 years to finally get this portrayal just right. Each previous attempt was entertaining in its own way, but his final go-round is the Joker. And Batman, he's wonderful too. I know people will make Smallville comparisons, and I agree. For better and worse. Sure, we don't get to see Batman until the final shot, just like Smallville. I really do think, however, of Smallville and Gotham as companion shows. Both took roots from iconic live-action movies and then went incredibly insane from there. And despite very brief on-screen appearances, each finale played to the personality and tone of their hero. Superman went around the city and pushed a planet out of the sky. Batman stayed to the shadows, being nothing more than a ghost or a shadow himself. And he did it well. I'm actually really glad. It shows that Bruce is over. He's become something else. He's not the kid we followed and see develop. He's become a man of his own, and that journey is one that we won't follow. Only counterpointed by how everyone in the show is immediately outclassed by this voice from the dark that completely cows them. The show we know is over. The rules we know no longer apply. But this is a fantastic last hurrah to everything that we knew and expected. It's bittersweet, but purposefully so. And yeah, it was funny, it was exciting, it was corny, cheesy, silly, and overall, just so exuberant. I'll miss Gotham. I'll miss this cast, these characters, this crew. They did a great job. For as much of a struggle as it was to get here, I'm glad it did. I really am. 2 thumbs up. And a series overall grade of 8 out of 10. Salute. Next up, we have Doom Patrol. Season 1, Episode 10, Francis Patrol. This was a pretty good, if a bit uneven episode. There is a relaxed nature to it, which I enjoyed a lot, and which also really underscores and emboldens the more dramatic aspects to great effect. What really stands out to me this episode is the focus on Cyborg. It's brilliant. It has this incredible sense of fear, horror, and dread. It's palpable and creates tension and unease like no tomorrow. It's the most gripping aspect of this episode. I love how it's seamlessly integrating some of Johns' New 52 stuff into the show's main atmosphere and themes. That's awesome, and it's pretty damn cool. After that though, comes the uneven aspects of the episode, like Negative Man and Robot Man. Their stuff is still good, but it kind of feels like things are spinning in their wheels a bit. Each has this perfect little bow to the end of their subplots episode, but it just feels stretched out and repetitive to get to there. I mean, it's fine enough, but they just don't have that same sense of actually being driven or really having captivating nature to their plots this episode. It feels like we've seen this all before, and it just sort of drags it out to get there. Jane, however, gets the worst of it. She's barely a character in this episode, and I forgot she was even in the episode by the time it ended. And Rita, she just sort of tags along. She has like a good character beat, but it's nothing really there. So the episode just feels a little bit emptier than most. It's still an enjoyable episode, but it's maybe the weakest structured and substantial so far. They really have set up something amazing with Cyborg though, and I can't wait to see how that continues to get dug into. It could be something special. The episode itself though is just overall okay, but I feel like it presents a new low for this series. And if this is the new low, then I hope we've struck bottom here, because it's still pretty okay. But overall, it's 1 thumb middle, 1 thumb up. And next week we have Cyborg at the ant farm and the Doom Patrol heading off to rescue him. And that could be insanely good. So can't wait. I really can't. Also, apparently, they call him Flex Mentalo in the series, and I've always said it Flex Mentalo, so this is fucking me up a lot. I'm not gonna lie. Anyway, we reached the Avengers Endgame review section. I'm gonna put the spoiler-free review right here, and then I'll tell you when and where to skip ahead of the spoiler review when we get to that. But let's get the spoiler-free thing out of the way first. It's okay. It's a good Avengers movie. It's not the worst MCU movie, and it's not the best one either. It sort of strikes it right in the middle, especially after the high bar in Infinity War, because that really did set a standard. And I don't think I'm being facetious in comparing both of those movies. It is a two-parter. This has lulls. It drags. The catharsis and emotional core is uneven and sometimes really lacking. The dramatic core itself whimpers out here and there, and you notice it. It starts to really bore and become tiresome. The humor itself is overbearing and jarring at times, and the themes aren't as cohesive or as impactful. So yeah, it's a downgrade, but it's still okay. It's definitely worthwhile if you enjoyed the first one and really enjoy the MCU as a whole. It just sort of does the bare minimum of any MCU movie that you would expect, except with the added gimmick of having all these other characters, which isn't that much of a gimmick. Overall, I'd give it a 7 out of 10. I had a decent time with it, but it's not something that I will ever rewatch. Avengers Endgame, 1 thumb up, 1 thumb middle, 7 out of 10. Now let's get into the spoilery stuff. If you check down the description, there'll be a time code to skip over all this, so I'll give you a couple of seconds for that. And if you're still here, let's get right on into it. Honestly, where I think this movie fails is that the plot and character beats don't work together. They're not really in sync, and the times they are is rare, which is a bit of a contrast from Infinity War. That blended both those aspects pretty much perfectly. Even with characters and subplots that I wasn't really invested in, that movie was still able to keep it centered around the driving emotional force of the movie and keeping it exciting and engaging that way. Endgame, the character beats can kind of be more slightly a distraction distraction at times than something you're really looking forward to. In a vacuum, they're pretty decent and pinpoint exactly what people like about the characters in general, but they can be jarring and interrupt the flow of the movie. It's a shame, but stuff like Cap homaging the elevator scene, or the few things we get with Thor and Ant-Man, which are meant to be more dramatic but then get suffocated by humor, come at what should be high-risk, high-tension moments, and then they just stutter into the movie rather than being formed cohesively around it. And it just feels like messy. It feels very messy. The plot itself, while not completely mishandled, doesn't have enough steam to carry a 3-hour runtime. And I said it. It just doesn't. Not that the 3 hours aren't justified. They are, kinda. But it also didn't need to be this long. The amount of characters and the various subsections of the story all matter, but it's wrapped around something so simple as well. They could have easily cut this down so much by cutting out characters and other character subplots. Simple, emotional, and intense. And by adding all these characters and by having to really give them all a scene or subplot to themselves, it drags it out. You lose that emotional impact. Because it's so long, you stop really having that emotional bond to why they're doing this, because you start spending so much time with humorous set pieces or one-liners or nods and homages or references, and it just gets boring. It really does. It gets boring. And the main avenue for these homages is the time travel itself, and you'd think that they'd have more fun with the time travel than they do. But they go out of their way to make the least entertaining version of time travel possible, and they play a lot of lip service to it, and when they shouldn't really have to. I think if you accept the idea of a superhero universe, you don't really need to hold the audience's hand with time travel, and then not even keep that consistent, because they really don't. It doesn't really fall apart until the final act, but it isn't on solid ground all the way through either. The previous film felt brisk, concise, and honed. This just goes all over the place, and it's not a good secondary half to that at all. Because, and this is the main thing for me, with 50 minutes to go, the main motivating engine of the movie is pretty much over. They sort of finish the movie before the final act even begins. The straight emotional core has been complete. They've undone everything, and all their loved ones are back. The next 50 minutes is just another Thanos keep away action scene, which is what the entirety of the first movie is about. Except this time, it's just way less interesting because they already succeeded, so it's not thrilling, and the movie devolves into fan service action figures punching each other, which is a crowd pleaser for sure, but it's just mindless action and CGI armies and characters rampaging at each other. There's nothing going on underneath it anymore, so it becomes really bland, and that's where I think the movie just becomes a complete and utter tiresome experience. Much of that has to do with Thanos too, who is relegated to a boring evil stock villain, and nothing more, nothing less. He just has some trailer quotable lines, but they lack the gravitas and foundation that you would expect, because this is a Thanos without the build-up and work put into making him an interesting villain. He's just evil space guy. We get actual Thanos in the movie too, in the prologue, and he's still excellent. He still has that development. He still has that motivation. He still has that whole different character to him. But then we get a younger, less developed version for the rest of the movie, and it was never going to have the same force behind it. And so it makes the length for the final act, where it just focused around this guy, even more egregious. The only thing really that kind of saves it is Iron Man. Like the previous movie, Iron Man is the MVP. He has the most to lose, he has the most developed investment, and he has the most powerful character bits that fit into the scope and themes of the movie and the MCU as a whole. And his death amidst this blurry, chaotic mess of final act is wonderful. It's pretty amazing. The rest, yeah, a bunch of cool and predictable fan service scenes. But maybe nothing in the movie comes as close as the Iron Man thoroughline and final payoff, which is a shame, because in Infinity War, with characters I don't even care about most of the time, it was almost neck and neck with really engaging and captivating subplots. And I know I've been more critical than praising about this movie in this review, but honestly, there's not much else to say in its favor other than it's just okay, that it's got some funny moments, that it has some decent action scenes here and there, and maybe one or two engaging character threads. But it's not great, it's far from flawless, and it's not a strong entry. The epilogue is a good example of that. On a story level, it glosses over anything at all that you'd be interested in. But for a few character beats, the epilogue is a little bit engaging. And overall, it's decent. It kind of sticks to major landing points, but that varies on whether or not you want this to work as a story or as a grand finale to a franchise. The landing points kind of miss the mark hard. They really do. But as a jumping off point and as like a closure ending for the capstone here, it mainly works enough. Any other spoilers would be superfluous. I guess I can mention my favorite moments, like Hawkeye and Black Widow fighting to be the one to die. I know it was meant to be sad, but it's also actually pretty funny when it started. And Ant-Man finding the desolated world. It's pretty heartening. Ant-Man's character is kind of wasted in this movie because he becomes simple, pointless comic relief. But yeah, in that one scene where he comes back to this completely, almost nearly devastated Earth, it teared me up a little bit. It's just so striking and emotional. And then it just sort of squanders it with lots of jokes. And well, everyone becomes comic relief. It's just needless. Like I said before, you have Thor. He has this whole PTSD storyline. Like he has all this sort of anxiety and insecurities balled up, and the movie focuses a lot on that, but it sort of just makes it a joke 80% of the time, and there's just really no actual engagement there. So yeah, this movie is really uneven. And I guess for one last thing, the movie does set up sequels and spin-offs pretty well, while also closing up. I don't care about any of them really, and the worst one by far has to be the Thor and Guardians of the Galaxy tease, because Thor and the Guardians don't really have that much chemistry, and we get this excruciating 2-minute long gag with them before the credits roll, and it's terrible. Like, I wanted it to end so badly, and it just felt like it was going on forever. So I hope that gets ignored, and honestly I hope most of it gets ignored, because it just props up way too many questions. There's more to be sure, but I feel like this should be wrapped up here. Some good, and a fair amount of boring, and a few bad. Nothing I would call outright terrible. Rest in peace, Iron Man. I'll miss you. Oh, and I guess Black Widow too, but these movies never really gave her much to do character-wise. Overall, 7 out of 10, 1 thumb middle, 1 thumb up. And now we head on into listener questions. We have 2 really tough ones this week. I hope I did them justice, but first things first, we have the ever-amazing Eggmath, and their question is, if I was in charge of a 10-year cinematic universe, how would I handle it? And this is a really tough question, mainly because I don't think cinematic universes are all they're cracked up to be, especially ones that run so long. Honestly, I feel like the incidental cinematic universes are the ones that hold up better. Ones like how the Asian American focused MTV movie Better Luck Tomorrow ties into the Fast and Furious series, or how the 2 adaptations of American Psycho and The Rules of Attraction were meant to be closely linked before leaving it to vague references. That's actually really cool to me. And if something had to be a series, then maybe do a regular sequence of sequels rather than spin-offs and franchises that spin off. But if I had to pick something, I guess I would choose Walter Hill's main trilogy of Decades as my base foundation. I'm talking about Streets of Fire, Last Man Standing, and The Warriors, each portraying a distinct flavoring of their time periods, like the 20s, the 50s, and the 70s, but each of them feeling like they could be connected. So I would do that. I would take Walter Hill's movies and connect them. Really just have a series of franchises and single films that play throughout history through time period style crime films, but are all really weaving together a tapestry of American crime throughout the decades, keeping connections brief and inconsequential, but also keeping them strong enough to really give it the aspect of a mosaic, sort of like how the Fargo TV show tried and kind of failed to do. That would be fun. I mean, I think the only other thing I would care about is a series of New Gods franchises leading into a Hunger Dogs finale movie. Like, you would have a Forever People single film, you'd have a Mr. Miracle single film, you'd have 2 New Gods movies, and then a finale film. But that seems kind of old hat. Honestly, the Walter Hill over timeline chronology, it seems like it could be really fun to play around with, and I guess I'd do that. I don't know if that's a good answer at all, but it seems to be the only one that I could give a damn about. Anyway, thank you for that question, Eggmath. I really enjoyed it. And, you know, it's fun. It's really fun. Our next question comes from the awesome Illuminated, whose links you can see below. And their question is, do you think there are franchises or works of fictions that could work well or even better if they were in comic form? And yeah, I do. This is a bit of a 2-pronged answer. One is not really an example, and one definitely is. But both spring from the mind of Alejandro Jodorowsky. His 2 works, The Meta Barons and The Sons of El Topo, could only be comics, although both started out as movies. The Meta Barons being well known for being his ideas for a Dune adaptation, and The Sons of El Topo being an unproduced script for a sequel to his cult classic western, initially called Abel Cain. Neither would have worked as movies at all. Jodorowsky, as a filmmaker, while interesting, I don't think he could ever have handled the scale or visuals that he would need and that he conceded for either. His comics have all been very lucky in finding artists and collaborators who understand the themes and attitude that he wanted each to have, and to have them find actual life that way. They can actually become breathtaking cosmic odysseys or mythical fables of the desert. It's a license to really go wild with it because he's only become infamous of attempting to capture that through film. So yeah, I think that El Topo and his Dune works are better in comic form than they ever could have been. But I guess to be fair and to give you a more straightforward answer, I guess the first thing that comes to mind would be The Sky Captain and The World Tomorrow. That movie, if you remember it, had maybe one good idea and it plays it okay, but it had the gimmick of being filtered and shot as though it were a pulpy cartoon come to life, like a radio show or something. And while that's a neat idea for a short, the visual look gets boring after a minute of an actual feature film. Now, if it was a comic and you got like Darwin Cook in his prime to do the art for it, then it would be instant gold. As a movie, it just feels stagnant if you aren't into it. It's a pretty cult film. Meanwhile, when you do something like that in a comic book, you can really sort of transcend and maybe even capture the feel of actually reading something that is pulpy and old-timey and sort of superhero serially because they both overlapped. But yeah, overall, it would be either Jodorowsky's movies turned to comics or obviously Sky Captain. And I do enjoy Sky Captain, but I understand why a lot of people don't. And thank you for that question so much, Illuminated. It was really fun answering it. I had a lot of fun thinking about it. And thank you again, Eggmath. Thank you both so much. These were fantastic. And I just want to say thank you to everyone out there who ever sent in questions, comments, or thoughts to the show. It means so much to me. It's so great, and I'm so glad and grateful for it. I really am. If anyone else out there has their own questions, comments, or topics they want to hear discussed on the show, you can always find me on Twitter at THE_SNICKMAN. And I want to give a shout out to the cover artist for the show at DOTEMCEE. They're fantastic. Check them out. They really do deserve it. Anyway, that's it for this week. Next week, I think we're finally getting a little bit of a lull, which will be great. Get some rest from all these releases and movies. But we'll see. We'll see what happens there. Hope you have a great week and see you then.